Okay, so this is day 185. It is Saturday, August 27th. This is my 100th daily episode of this. Now, I started with a few that I did all together, like day 85, 86, 87, 88, 89. Like I did that. But this is my 100th day. I've done about 80 some odd days in a row, and I'm going to continue doing this as long as I can because I want people to be updated about what's going on. Events like the Amber Heard trial and Johnny Depp got in the way and displaced what was going on in Ukraine, and it's important for people to understand really what's going on. So I'm going to go over daily events like I normally do, but I'm going to also talk about some lessons learned. So one of the lessons learned is I used aggregators early on, like The Guardian does a good job, the New York Times, Washington Post does a good job, Al Jazeera does a good job. I mean, and the Guardian and Al Jazeera are free. You have to have subscriptions to some of the others. But then I try to focus on the big things. Like the biggest thing that could possibly go wrong is Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant melting down, because that would affect Eastern Europe and Russia primarily, and then spread into Western Europe and then to the whole world. The situation is still, according to Zelensky, very risky. Residents of Zaporizhzhia have been given iodine tablets. That's a really bad sign, right? Other things, Ukrainian forces have struck at an important bridge in Kherson, so you can kind of get a sense of what's going on from those kind of things. Now I look at the map, and here is a map of what's going on in Donetsk, and if you just let me scroll out just a little bit. Now this is a month ago, and I'm going to just click on this a bunch, and you'll see what's happened over the last month. The Russians have gained ground, but it's not like big ground, not like what you'd expect for them to gain in a month. Like look at the map. There's little bits that are coming up, but it's not a lot. And Russian generals have been fired over this because they're not taking territory as quickly as possible. Now, I look at the map, but I don't spend my entire time on the map. I think if you want to understand just a military thing, and I would say go watch Denis Davidov, Davydov. He does a masterful job. I watch him. He gives me a great understanding of what's going on. I say go watch him because he does almost well, now he's branched out a little bit, but he does mostly the map and explains. And he's Ukrainian. He's a airline pilot from there, so he understands the geography, and he does a great job with that. Now, what I try to do here is I try to look at, here's military. There's also a political war. There's also an economic war. There's also a propaganda war. So I'm trying to hit all the different levels simultaneously. So I would argue, if you want to see a good military view, go see Denis Davidov. If you want to see me, just type in Professor Gerdes. That's my name, Gerdes. Type in Professor Gerdes, and then what you'll see is you'll see me come up here first. This is like as a management professor. That's what I am. I teach leadership courses. And then you'll also see here daily updates from Ukraine, and you click on that one. It's the one with Zelensky's face on it, and that's where you'll find me if you want to find me. Okay, next. I also would argue that you should go and you should look at like reputable sources about what's going on. Like the Institute for the Study of War in the United States does a great job covering everything everything that's moving, all the moving military pieces, but it's only dealing really with the military stuff. So it's talking about volunteer battalions, the 3rd Russian Army Corps that they're trying to put together, and it's going to be used. They're training on modern military, but it's probably going to be ineffective in combat. Their claim, and they gave reasons why. Ukrainian Southern Operation Command say a 10-person Russian sabotage or reconnaissance group attempted to assault in operations, but this is evidence that their military operation or force in Kherson has degraded even further than they thought. They're attempting to conduct offensive operations at too low a meaningful level, and so they interpret things very nicely. And they talk about the limited attacks in Kharkiv and Izium and northeast of Seversk and Bakhmut and whatever else. And these limited attacks were exactly what you saw here. So one line of evidence is showing what's going on in another. I also look at the UK Ministry of Defense. There's been intense fighting near Seversk and Bakhmut. Not a lot of ground is changed hands, but still fighting. The pro-Russian separatists have made some ground, but there's a realistic possibility that Russia has increased efforts in Donbass in an effort or an attempt to draw in or fix in Ukrainian units to keep them from counterattacking in the south. And I think there might be something to that. Now, go to original sources. This is another thing that I would say is very important. So I read Zelensky's speeches. I have all his speeches in a Word file up through yesterday. And there's a reason for that, because when he's explaining, he's interpreting what's going on as well. But don't just read him, read the other side as well. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. By the way, I've started doing this because I wrote a book on Zelensky over spring break, because after I hear I need ammunition, not a ride, I think, wait, who is this guy? Why didn't he flee like everybody expected him to? The Russians certainly expected him to, and that came out in some documents. And so I just started writing the book, and I've been updating it ever since. I've updated much of the war, up to about 5 months worth. Okay. Look for reliable sources, like Interfax Ukraine is reliable from a Ukrainian perspective. There's also going to be a Russian perspective, and that's like almost funhouse smoke and mirrors. It's really bizarre what they do, but this is really interesting. He has like almost no navy. In fact, I talk about this here in Crimea, why attacks on the Crimea are so devastating. The Ukrainians had one major naval vessel. They scuttled it early on. They also sunk the Moskva and 2 other Ukrainian vessels. So it's like all the attacks in the Black Sea have been on the Ukrainian side, because while Russia's threatening, no, not all the attacks. Russia can shoot missiles into Ukraine. But as far as Navy on Navy, it's all been Ukraine, and that's just fascinating to watch. If you have not seen why attacks on Crimea are so devastating, please watch that. It's fascinating. Okay, you want to look at Reuters, AP, other reputable Western news sources to understand what's going on. So, for example, Putin ordered the benefit payments for people arriving in Russia from Ukraine. What's he doing? He's providing pension for these people, like he's trying to draw them into Russia away from Ukraine. He did the same thing for parents who, this is 10,000 rubles or $170. It's not a lot, but it's something, especially with inflation. And so he did the same thing for parents who would put their children in school, if it's like the Russian curriculum school, because he's trying to kind of Russify. And it's pretty clear that that's what's going on here. CNN had this fascinating article about Ukraine is using resistance warfare. It was a doctrine developed by the United States in 2013 following the war with Georgia. Like, hey, how do we keep this from happening again? And then they really picked up steam after 2014 when Russia went and took Crimea and annexed it and started the war in Donbass. And then so this doctrine has been like picking up some steam. This was a retired lieutenant general from the special forces who's saying like they're using every resource, and they're also using some highly unconventional means to disrupt the Russian military. And it's incredible to see what people can do when they have the spine and the backbone. And he said it's high probability, he would say that it's very plausible that the ROC principles are playing out in actual warfare right now. Things like what's going on with the attacks in Crimea and that kind of thing. Like, how did things keep blowing up behind the scenes? It's not just a fire started, it's something's happening. First, Estonia and Lithuania and Poland expressed real enthusiasm. So the Baltic states, the 3 Baltic states and Poland, they remember Soviet oppression, and they're like the biggest supporters of Ukraine at this point. And since its inception, 15 countries have taken part in some sort of training in this doctrine. So that's what's going on there, and it's really fascinating to see these kind of things come together. Okay, last thing, I've started doing this, and I watch RT. Like, I actually watch the channel. You can watch it through Rumble because it's usually banned in much of the United States. I can't even see it at work. So I watch RT, I read Pravda, I look at TASS, I try to understand things from a Russian propaganda position. And I say propaganda because they know that they're not giving a clear, objective view. They're giving the state line. So an article like this, Finnish firm warns a toilet paper shortage. Well, why? Because these Russian sanctions are just so bad for the Western Europe, and this is what they're going to be experiencing. And they keep pumping out stuff like this after this, after this, after this, and their people are reading it. But it's also getting picked up on, and so here's a big lesson. It's also getting picked up on Indian and African and Islamic news channels. Like they put these things out, and I showed in previous episodes how, here, let's just highlight, copy and paste the entire article, put it into Google. Yep, you see it in this Indian and this Islamic and whatever other like lazy newspapers are out there, and it just gets broadcast and rebroadcast. Okay, so here are some quick lessons about what I've learned since starting to do this. One, the Russians lie, and they don't lie just to lie. They lie for strategic reasons to try to, have a propaganda effect. And it's usually whatever they're doing, they lie about their opponents doing. Right? You'll see it if you start to look for it. Two, Zelensky is a great leader. He was a terrible peacetime president with 25% approval rating, but at this point he has 85 to 93% approval rating by Ukrainians, and he's actually doing a masterful job bringing in Western weapons, getting allies behind him, strengthening and bolstering his people's resolve. And I can't say enough good things about him. The Ukrainians themselves have had incredible fortitude, and I can't say enough good things about them as what they're doing. There was a Pentagon official who said that on a scale of 1 to 10, the Ukrainians were a 12 militarily, and they really have proven themselves. I've known Ukrainians who were like very proud to be Ukrainians, and before this I didn't know much about Ukraine, but I get it. Right? They have a reason to be proud now. If not before, they certainly do now. Other lessons are just like triangulate on the news. If you want to know what's going on, don't just read one source. Don't even just watch my videos. Although I hope that you subscribe if you haven't yet, because I do these daily. I try to triangulate on the news. So I'm trying to watch all different sources and get a good sense of it. And over time, like your cognitive framework, like the things that you understand about it, it builds. You scaffold and understand more and more about it. So you start to make these connections that you haven't seen elsewhere, and I try to communicate that because, again, Western press has a short attention span, and they have kind of drifted away from this story, and this is one of the biggest stories of our century. And Zelensky is a once in a generation leader that is just, he's worth understanding and following, and the Ukrainian people deserve to have this well known and understood throughout the world of what they're doing, how they're resisting. So thank you for your time, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.